blanket fort. I'm Strixon, this is my blanket fort, and the music is way too loud, isn't it? Sorry about that. Oh, good morning, my friends. So, I was thinking, how fun would it be? Hi, welcome in. I saw you just followed. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. You get to see me first thing in the morning. We're gonna be reading some Legend of Drizzt. This copy I have is all the way fucked up, but it's okay. We're good. Yeah, I just figured it'd be really nice to get back to some like really chill epic fantasy. Really go back to where my stream started, back when I first, joined 2 years ago. I was reading Lord of the Rings, in my closet. Oh, Banksy's here. So interested in what we're doing today. Hey, baby. Yeah, it's my baby boy. I love him. That's Banksy, if you guys are all curious. Okay. Ooh, real quick before that, though, just a touch makeup. Just to get my face in order, you know? Isn't he cute? I love that boy so much. Lightly cover up the chin, but really I'm not really going for a huge makeup look today. I don't want to like do full foundation and contour and blush. That just sounds like too much work this morning, you know? It's Friday. I've got work later, unfortunately. Where's my gosh dang eyeliner? Oh, thank you.
Good morning.
There's my eyeliner. Real quick eyeliner, and then we can get started with the story, yeah? Just lose it. There it is. So how are you? I'm having an okay morning. It's Friday, have shit going on, but that's okay. Had a little bit of a hard time falling asleep last night, but that wasn't that bad. I'm glad to hear. Yeah. Don't mind me. Just a warm morning, huh? And it's going to be an even warmer day. That's what it's like living in California. Nice chill morning. Nice chill. Grab some coffee. Have a good time. Hi. Welcome in, every friends. Thank you so much for the follow. Hope you all are having a great, wonderful morning. Almost done with getting my eyeliner done, and then we will get to the story. This is going to be the first part. I mean, we haven't started reading this yet, which is really exciting for everybody in the stream right now. I know some people are always sad when, we're halfway through the book, and they only just then came in. Though I will be starting to upload these reading streams to YouTube, so that people can keep up with them. That's nice. Thank you. Alright, now that the eyeliner has been applied, we are good to go. Oh, it's so hot. But yes, the Legend of Drizzt. We'll go ahead and get our nice read on. Alright, so we do start with 1, Homeland. Hey, thanks for the emote! I do love when people pop in their good fun emotes. And it also comes with a map of Menzoberranzan. Or if you're the audiobook, which I've listened to the audiobook of this first book before, Menzoberranzan, which drives me gosh dang crazy. Well, all good. Nice. All right, Prelude. Never does a star grace this land with the poet's light of twinkling mysteries, nor does the sun send to hear its rays of warm life. This is the Underdark, the secret world beneath the bustling surface of the Forgotten Realms, whose sky is a ceiling of heartless stone, whose walls show the gray blandness of death in the torchlight of the foolish surface dwellers that stumble here. This is not their world, not the world of light. Most who come here uninvited do not return. Those who do escape to the safety of their surface homes return changed. Their eyes have seen the shadows and the gloom, the inevitable doom of the Underdark. Dark corridors meander through the dark realm in winding courses, connecting caverns great and small with ceilings high and low. Mounds of stone as pointed as teeth of a sleeping dragon leer down in silent threat, or rise up to block the way of intruders. There is a silence here, profound and foreboding, the crouched hush of a predator at work. Too often, the only sound, the only reminder to travelers in the Underdark that they have not lost their sense of hearing altogether, is a distant and echoing drip of water. Beating like the heart of a beast, slipping through the silent stones to the underdark pools of chilled water. What lies beneath the still onyx surface of these pools one can only guess. What secrets await the brave, what horrors await the foolish. Only the imagination can reveal, until the stillness is disturbed. This is the Underdark. Ooh. Oh, there's another part to the prelude. Turn the page. And also, thank you guys for the emotes. They're fun. There are pockets of life here. There we go. Cities as great as many of those on the surface. Around any of the countless bends and turns in the gray stone, a traveler might stumble suddenly into the perimeter of such a city, a stark contrast to the emptiness of the corridors. These places are not havens, though. Only a foolish traveler would assume so. They are the homes of the most evil races in all the realms, most notably the Duragar, the Kuotoa, and the Drow. In one such cavern, 2 miles wide and 1,000 feet high, looms Menzoberranzan, a monument to the otherworldly and ultimately deadly grace that marks the race of the Drow elves. Menzoberranzan is not a large city by Drow standards. Only 20,000 dark elves reside there. Where in ages past there had been an empty cavern of roughly shaped stalactites and stalagmites, now stands artistry. Row after row of carved castles thrumming in a quiet glow of magic. The city is perfection of form, where not a stone has been left to its natural shape. This sense of order and control, however, is but a cruel facade. A deception hiding the chaos and vileness that rule the Dark Elves' hearts. Like their cities, they are beautiful, slender, and delicate people, with features sharp and haunting. Yet the Drow are the rulers of this unruled world, the deadliest of the deadly. And all other races take cautious note of their passing. Beauty itself pales at the end of the Dark Elf's sword. The Drow are the survivors, and this is the Underdark, the Valley of Death, the land of nameless nightmares. Okay. Setting the tone, setting the scene. This is gonna be taking place pretty much all in Menzoberranzan. A little bit on the outskirts, obviously, but this is like... I've read this first book. This first book is like how Drizzt was born, his family life, what the politics in Menzoberranzan are like, which are very cutthroat, every man for himself sort of situation. I see, yeah. Alright, part 1. Station. In all the world of the Drow, there is no more important word. It is the calling of our religion. The incessant pulling of hungering heartstrings. Ambition overrides good sense, and compassion is thrown away in its face. All in the name of Lolth, the Spider Queen. Ascension to power in Drow society is a simple process of assassination. The Spider Queen is a deity of chaos, and she and her high priestesses, the true rulers of the Drow world, do not look with ill favor upon ambitious individuals wielding poisoned daggers. Of course, there are rules of behavior. Every society must boast of these. To openly commit murder or wage war invites the pretense of justice, and penalties exacted in the name of Drow justice are merciless. To stick a dagger in the back of a rival during the chaos of a larger battle, or in the quiet shadows of an alley, however, is quite acceptable, even applauded. Investigation is not the forte of Drow justice. No one cares enough to bother. Station is the way of Lolth, the ambition she bestows to further the chaos, to keep her Drow children along their appointed course of self-imprisonment. Children? Pawns, more likely. Dancing dolls for the Spider Queen, puppets on the imperceptible but impervious strands of her web. All climb the Spider Queen's ladders, all hunt for her pleasure, and all fall to the hunters of her pleasure. Station is the paradox of the world of my people, the limitation of our power within the hunger for power. It is gained through treachery, and invites treachery against those who gain it. Those most powerful in Menzoberranzan spend their days watching over their shoulders, defending against the daggers that would come find their backs. Their deaths usually come from the front. And that's attributed to Drizzt Do'Urden, the hero of our tale. Alright. Now we're in, officially, Chapter 1. Menzoberranzan. To a surface dweller, he might have passed undetected only a foot away. The padded footfalls of his lizard mount were too light to be heard, and the pliable and perfectly crafted mesh armor that both rider and mount wore bent and creased with their movements, as well as if the suits had grown over their skin. Dinan's lizard trotted along with an easy but swift gait, floating over the broken floor, up the walls, and even across the long tunnel ceiling. Subterranean lizards, with their sticky, soft, three-toed feet, were preferred mounts for just this ability to scale stone as easily as a spider. Crossing hard ground left no damning tracks in the lighted surface world, but nearly all the creatures in the Underdark possessed infravision, the ability to see in the infrared spectrum. Footfalls left heat residue that could be easily tracked if they followed a predictable course along the corridor's floor. Dinan clamped tight to his saddle as the lizard plodded along a stretch of ceiling, and then sprang out in a twisted descent to a point farther along the wall. Dinan did not want to be tracked. He had no light to guide him, but he needed none. He was a dark elf, a drow, an ebon-skinned cousin of those sylvan folk who danced under the stars of the world's surface. To Dinan's superior eyes, which translated subtle variations of heat into vivid, colorful images, the Underdark was far from a lightless place. Colors all across the spectrum swirled before him in the stones of the walls and the floor, heated by some distant fissure or hot stream. The heat of the living things was most distinctive, letting the Dark Elf view his enemies in details as intricate as any surface dweller would find in brilliant daylight. I love this, really interesting, detailed description of, dark vision. Superior dark vision, even. I don't know if y'all play Dungeons and Dragons, but yeah, this is, Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms. And, the Drow have superior dark vision, and the way they describe it is I just love it. I just love... R.A. Salvatore is the author, and he is just a master wordsmith. Normally, Dinan would not have left the city alone. The world of the Underdark was far too dangerous for solo treks, even for a drow elf. This day was different, though. Dinan had to be certain that no unfriendly drow eyes marked his passage. Hi! Thank you so much for following. Welcome to the Blanket Fort. I hope you're having a lovely day today. Oop, can't see you over all the all the little emotes. Kaicho-chan. Alright. This day was different, though. Dinan had to be certain that no unfriendly drow eyes marked his passage. A soft blue magical glow beyond the sculpted archway told the drow that he neared the city's entrance, and he slowed the lizard's pace accordingly. Few used this narrow tunnel, which opened into the Tir Brish, the northern section of Menzo Baranzan devoted to the Academy, but none of the mistresses and masters, the instructors of the Academy, could pass through here without attracting suspicion. Dinan was always nervous when he came to this point. Of the 100 tunnels that opened off the main cavern of Menzo Baranzan, this one was the best guarded. Beyond the archway, twin statues of gigantic spiders sat in quiet defense. If an enemy crossed through, the spiders would animate and attack, and alarms would be sounded throughout the academy. Dinan dismounted, leaving his lizard clinging comfortably to a wall at his chest level. He reached under the collar of his Huafui, his magical shielding cloak, and took out his neck purse. From this, Dinan produced the insignia of House Do'Urden, a spider wielding various weapons in each of its 8 legs, emblazoned with the letters DN, for Daramon Nashazabaranon, the ancient and formal name of House Do'Urden. "You will wait my return," Demon whispered to the lizard as he waved the insignia before it. As with all the drow houses, the insignia of House Do'Urden had held several magical dwellers, one of which gave the family members absolute control over the house pets. The lizard would obey unfailingly, holding its position as though it were rooted to the stone, even if a scurry rat, its favorite little morsel, napped a few feet from its maw. Dinan took a deep breath and gingerly stepped into the archway. He could see the spiders leering down at him from their 15-foot height. He was a drow of the city, not an enemy, and could pass through any other tunnel unconcerned, but the academy was an unpredictable place. Dinan had heard that the spiders often refused entry, viciously, to uninvited Drow. He would not be delayed by fears and possibilities. Dinan reminded himself his business was of the utmost importance to his family's battle plans. Looking straight ahead, away from the towering spiders, he strode between them and onto the floor of the Tir Brish. He moved to the side and paused, first to be certain that no one lurked nearby, and to admire the sweeping view of Menzoberranzan. No one, Drow or otherwise, had ever looked out from this spot without a sense of wonder at the Drow city. Tir Brish was the highest point on the floor of the 2-mile cavern, affording a panoramic view to the rest of Menzoberranzan. The cubby of the academy was narrow, holding only the 3 structures that comprised the Drow school: Arak Tinalith, the spider-shaped school of Lolth, Sorcerer, the gracefully curving, many-spired tower of wizardry, and the Melee Magther, the somewhat plain pyramidal structure where male fighters learned their trade. Beyond the Tir Brish, through the ornate stalagmite columns that marked the entrance to the academy, the cavern dropped away quickly and spread wide, going far beyond Dinan's line of vision to either side, farther back than his keen eyes could possibly see. The colors of Menzoberranzan were threefold to the sensitive eyes of the Drow. Heat patterns from various fissures and hot springs swirled about the entire cavern. Purple and red, bright yellow and subtle blue, crossed and merged, climbed up the walls and stalagmite mounds, or ran off singularly in cutting lines against the black backdrop of dim gray stone. More confined than these generalized and natural gradations of color in the infrared spectrum were the regions of intense magic, like the spiders Dinan had walked between, virtually glowing with energy. Finally, there were the actual lights of the city. Fairy fire and highlighted sculptures of the houses. The Drow were proud of their beauty of their designs, and especially ornate columns and perfectly crafted gargoyles were almost always lined in permanent magical lights. Even from this distance, Dinan could make out House Benair, first house of Menzoberranzan. It encompassed 20 stalagmite pillars and half again that number of gigantic stalactites. House Benair had existed for 5,000 years, since the founding of Menzoberranzan, and in that time, the work to perfect the house's art had never ceased. Practically every inch of the immense structure glowed in fairy fire, blue at the outlying towers and brilliant purple at the huge central dome. The sharp light of candles, foreign to the Underdark, glared through some of the windows of the distant houses. Only clerics or wizards would light the fires. Dinan knew, as necessary, pains in their world of scrolls and parchments. This was Menzoberranzan, the city of Drow. 20,000 dark elves lived there, 20,000 soldiers in the army of evil. A wicked smile spread across Dinan's thin lips when he thought of some of those soldiers who would fall this night. Dinan studied Narbundel, the huge central pillar that served as the time clock of Menzoberranzan. Narbundel was the only way the Drow had to mark the passage of time in a world that otherwise knew no days and no seasons. At the end of each day, the city's appointed archmage cast his magical fires into the base of the stone pillar. There the spell lingered throughout the cycle, a full day on the surface, and gradually spread its warmth up the structure of Narbundel until the whole of it glowed red in the infrared spectrum. The pillar was fully dark now, cooled since the Dwemer's fires had expired. The wizard was even now at the base, Dinan reasoned, ready to begin the cycle anew. It was midnight, the appointed hour. Dinan moved away from the spiders and the tunnel exit and crept along the side of Tir Brish, seeking the shadows of heat patterns in the wall, which would effectively hide the distinct outline of his own body temperature. He came at last to Sorcerer, the school of wizardry, and slipped into the narrow alley between the tower's curving base and the Tir Brish's outer wall. Student or master, came the expected whisper. Only a master may walk out of house in Tir Brish in the black death of Narbundel, Dinan responded. A heavily robed figure moved around the arc of the structure to stand before Dinan. The stranger remained in the customary posture of a master of Drow Academy, his arms out before him and bent at the elbows, his hands tight together, one on the top of the other in front of his chest. I love those emotes so much. Cat in some sunglasses? Hell yeah. That pose was the only thing about this one that seemed normal to Dinan. Greetings, faceless one. He signaled in the silent hand code of the Drow, a language as detailed as the spoken word. The quiver of Dinan's hands belied his calm face, though for the sight of this wizard put him as far on edge of his nerves as he had ever been. Second boy, Do'Urden, the wizard replied in the gestured code. Have you my payment? You will be compensated, Dinan signaled pointedly, regaining his composure in the first swelling bubbles of his temper. Do you dare doubt the promise of Malice Do'Urden, matron mother of Dareman Nashez Baranon, 10th house of Menzo Baranzan? The faceless one slumped back, knowing he had erred. My apologies, second boy of House Do'Urden, he answered, dropping to one knee in a gesture of surrender. Since he had entered this conspiracy, the wizard had feared that his impatience might cost him his life. He had been caught in the violent throes of one of his own magical experiments, the tragedy melting away all of his facial features and leaving behind a blank hotspot of white and green goo. Ugh. Matron Malice Do'Urden, reputedly as skilled as anyone in all the vast city in mixing potions and salves, had offered him a sliver of hope that he could not pass by. No pity found its way into Dinan's callous heart, but House Do'Urden needed the wizard. You will get your salve, Dinan promised calmly, when Alton DeVere is dead. Of course, the wizard agreed. This night? Dinan crossed his arms and considered the question. Matron Malice had instructed him that Alton DeVere should die even as their family's battle commenced. That scenario now seemed too clean, too easy to Dinan. The faceless one did not miss the sparkle that suddenly brightened the scarlet glow in the young Do'Urden's heat-sensing eyes. Wait for Narbendel's light to approach its zenith, Dinan replied, his hands working through the signals excitedly, his grim assuming even more of a twisted grin. Should the doomed boy know his house's fate before he dies? The wizard asked, guessing the wicked intentions behind Dinan's instructions. As the killing blow falls, answered Dinan, let Alton DeVere die without hope. Wow. Yeah, so what's basically going on is, Do'Urden, House Do'Urden is planning to completely kill an entire family so that they can move up in standing. Drow politics. You know. As long as they don't get caught, you know, as long as they kill everybody in one fell swoop, they're good. Dinan retrieved his mount and sped off down the empty corridors, finding an intersecting route that would take him in through a different entrance to the city proper. He came in along the eastern end of the great cavern, Menzo Baranzan's produce section, where no Drow families would see that he had been outside the city limits, and where only a few unremarkable stalagmite pillars rose up from the flat stone. Dinan spurred his mount along the banks of Donegarden, the city's small pond with its moss-covered island that housed a fair-sized herd of cattle-like creatures called Roth. 100 goblins and orcs looked up from their herding and fishing duties to mark the Drow soldiers' swift passage. Knowing their restrictions as slaves, they took care not to look Dinan in the eye. Which, yeah, by the way, Drows have, like, a fuck ton of slaves. Dinan would have paid them no heed anyway. He was too consumed by the urgency of the moment. He kicked his lizard to even greater speeds, and when he again was on the flat and curving avenues between the glowing Drow castles, he moved towards the south-central region of the city, towards the grove of giant mushrooms that marked the section of the finest houses in Menzo Baranzan. As he came around one blind turn, he nearly ran over a group of 4 wandering bugbears. The giant, hairy goblin things paused a moment to consider the Drow, then moved slowly, but purposely, out of his way. You're getting sleepy from this. It's so relaxing. Ah, that's so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. That's honestly my aim with this. Sometimes people wake up first thing in the morning and they're like, ugh, I want to keep sleeping. Well, here's a nice relaxing stream for you. The bugbears recognized him as a member of House Do'Urden, Dinan knew. He was a noble, a son of a high priestess, and his surname, Do'Urden, was the name of his house. Of the 20,000 dark elves in Menzoberranzan, only 1,000 or so were nobles. Actually, the children of the 67 recognized families of the city. The rest were common soldiers. Bugbears were not stupid creatures. They knew a noble from a commoner, and though Drow elves did not carry their family insignia in plain view, the pointed, tailed cut of Dinan's stark white hair and distinctive pattern of purples and reds in his black pawafwi told them well enough who he was. The mission's urgency pressed on Dinan, but he could not ignore the bugbear's slight. How fast would they scamper away if he had been a member of House Baenor, or one of the other 7 ruling houses, he wondered. You will learn to respect House Do'Urden soon enough, the dark elf whispered under his breath, as he turned and charged his lizard at the group. The bugbears broke into a run, turning down an alley strewn with stones and debris. Dinan found his satisfaction by calling the innate powers of his race. He summoned a globe of darkness, impervious to both infravision and normal sight, in the fleeing creature's path. He supposed that it was unwise to call such attention to himself, but a moment later, when he heard the crashing and sputtering curses as the bugbear stumbled blindly over the stones, he felt it was worth the risk. His anger sated, he moved off again, picking a more careful route through the heat shadows. As a member of the 10th house of the city, Dinan could go as he pleased within the giant cavern without question. But Matron Malice had made it clear that no one connected to House Do'Urden was to be caught anywhere near the Mushroom Grove. Matron Malice, Dinan's mother, was not to be crossed, but it was only a rule after all. In Menzoberranzan, one rule took precedent over all the petty others. Don't get caught. Boy, hello boy, welcome. Hey, thanks for doing that. Hey, your cat put blanket forts with no forts built. I'm sorry, I don't got the means. So turn the volume back down a little bit. I turned it up so y'all could hear the "Here Comes the Boy" a bit better. I need to re-record that and just make it louder. I do very much apologize about that. Where was I? There we go, at the bottom. At the Mushroom Grove's southern end, the impetuous Drow found what he was looking for. A cluster of 5 huge floor-to-ceiling pillars that were hollowed into a network of chambers and connected with metal and stone parapets and bridges. Red, glowing gargoyles, the standard of the house, glared down from 100 perches, like a silent sentries. This was House Devere, 4th house of Menzoberranzan. Grab the couch cushions or get some hooks in the walls. I don't have couch cushions. My couch is like one big cushion, because it's cheap. I'm taking a sip. Yes, they are going to be destroying the 4th house, Devere. Take another one, Uwu. Oh my god. Perfect, lean it from the dresser to the bed. Oh my gosh, guys. You guys are too much. Maybe one of these days we'll do, that's a great book series. One of this day we'll probably do like a special actual blanket fort stream where we set something up. A stockade of all the mushrooms ringed the place. Every 5th one a shrieker, a sentient fungus named, and favored as guardians, for the shrill cries of alarm it emitted whenever a living being passed it. Dinan kept a cautious distance, not wanting to set off one of the shriekers, and knowing also that other, more deadly wards protected the fortress. Matron Malice would see to those. An expectant hush permeated the air of the city section. It was general knowledge throughout Menzoberranzan that Matron Guinevere of House de Vere had fallen out of favor with Lolth, the Spider Queen deity, to all Drow and the true source of every house's strength. Such circumstances were never openly discussed among Drow, but everyone who knew fully expected that some family lower in the city hierarchy would soon strike out against the crippled House de Vere. Matron Guinevere, her family had been the last to learn of the Spider Queen's displeasure, ever was that Lolth's devious way. And Dinan could tell by scanning the outside of the House de Vere that the doomed family had not found sufficient time to erect proper defenses. De Vere sported nearly 400 soldiers, many female, but those that Dinan could now see at their posts along the parapet seemed nervous and unsure. Dinan's smile spread even wider when he thought of his own house, which grew in power daily under the cunning guidance of Matron Malice. With all three of his sisters rapidly approaching the status of High Priestess, his brother an accomplished wizard, and his uncle Zacnafane, the finest weapons master in all of Menzoberranzan, busily training the 300 soldiers, House Do'Urden was a complete force, and Matron Malice, unlike Guinevere, was in the Spider Queen's full favor. Deorman Nashes Baranon, Dinan muttered under his breath, using the formal and ancestral reference to House Do'Urden, 9th house of Menzoberranzan. He liked the sound of it. Halfway across the city, beyond the silver-glowing balcony and the arched doorway 20 feet up the cavern's west wall, sat the principals of House Do'Urden, gathered to outline the final plans of the night's work. Gotta say, it's been about 35 years since I've read the books. Yeah, oh my gosh, these books are pretty old. I first read these books actually like a year and a half ago. Well, I read the first book. I haven't gotten through the second book, but you know, that's what we're here to do. Anyway, on the raised dais at the back of the small audience chamber sat venerable Matron Malice, her belly swollen in the final hours of pregnancy. Flanking her in their places of honor were her three daughters, Maya, Vierna, and the eldest, Briza, a newly ordained high priestess of Lolth. Maya and Vierna appeared as the younger versions of their mother, slender and deceptively small though possessing great strength. Briza, though hardly carried the family resemblance, she was big, huge by Drow standards, and rounded in the shoulders and hips. Those who knew Briza well figured that her size was merely a circumstance of her temperament. A smaller body could not have contained the anger and brutal streak of House Do'Urden's newest high priestess. Dinan should return soon, remarked Risen, the present patron of the family, to let us know if the time is right for the assault. We go before Narbundel finds its morning glow, Briza snapped at him, in her thick but razor-sharp voice. She turned a crooked smile to her mother, seeking approval for putting the male in his place. The child becomes this night, Matron Malice explained to her anxious husband. We go no matter what news Dinan bears. It will be a boy child, groaned Briza, making no effort to hide her disappointment. Third living son of House Do'Urden. To be sacrificed to Lolth, put in Zacnafane, a former patron of the house who now held the important position of weapons master. The skilled Drow fighter seemed quite pleased at the thought of sacrifice, as did Nalfane, the family's eldest son, who stood at Zac's side. Nalfane was the elder boy and needed no more competition beyond Dinan within the ranks of House Do'Urden. In accord with custom, Briza glowered and the red of her eyes brightened, to aid in our victory. Reason shifted uncomfortably. Matron Malice, he dared to speak. You know well the difficulties of birthing. Might the pain distract you? You dare question the matron mother? Briza started sharply, reaching for the snake-headed whip so comfortably strapped and writhing on her belt. Matron Malice stopped her with an outstretched hand. Attend to the fighting, Matron said to Reason. Let the females of the house see to the important matters of this battle. Reason shifted again and dropped his gaze. Dinan came to the magically wrought fence that connected the keep within the city's west walls with the two small stalagmite towers of House Do'Urden, which formed the courtyard to the compound. The fence was adamantine, the hardest metal in all the world, and adorning it were 100 weapon-wielding spider carvings, each ensorcelled with deadly glyphs and wards. The mighty gate of House Do'Urden was the envy of many a Drow house, but so soon after viewing the spectacular houses in the Mushroom Grove, Dinan could only find disappointment when looking upon his own abode. The compound was plain, somewhat bare, as was the section of wall, with the notable exception of the mithril and adamantine balcony running along the second level, by the arched doorway reserved for the nobility of the family. Each baluster of the balcony sported 1,000 carvings, all of which blended into a single piece of art. House Do'Urden, unlike the great majority of the houses in Menzoberranzan, did not stand free within groves of stalactites and stalagmites. The bulk of the structure was within a cave. While the setup was indisputably defensible, Dinan found himself wishing that his family could show a bit more grandeur. An excited soldier rushed to open the gate for the returning second boy. Dinan swept past him without so much a word of greeting and moved across the courtyard, conscious of the 100 and more curious glances that fell upon him. The soldiers and slaves knew that Dinan's mission this night had something to do with the anticipated battle. No stairway led to the silvery balcony of House Do'Urden's second level. This, too, was a precautionary measure designed to segregate the leaders of the houses from the rabble and the slaves. Drow nobles needed no stairs. Another manifestation of their innate magical abilities allowed them the power of levitation. With hardly a conscious thought to the act, Dinan drifted easily through the air and dropped onto the balcony. He rushed through the archway and down the house's main central corridor, which was dimly lit in the soft hues of fairy fire, allowing for sight in the normal light spectrum, but not bright enough to defeat the use of infravision. The ornate brass door at the corridor's end marked the second boy's destination. He paused before it to allow his eyes to shift back to the infrared spectrum. Unlike the corridor, the room beyond the door had no light source. It was the audience hall of the High Priestess, the anteroom to House Do'Urden's Grand Chapel. The Drow clerical rooms, in accord with dark rites of the Spider Queen, were not places of light. Let me get another sip of water. When he felt he was prepared, Dinan pushed straight through the door, shoving past two shocked female guards without hesitation, moving boldly to stand before his mother. All three of the family's daughters narrowed their eyes at the brash and pretentious brother. To enter without permission, he knew they were thinking. Would that it was he who was to be sacrificed this night. As much as he enjoyed testing the limitations of his inferior station as a male, Dinan could not ignore the threatening dances of Irina, Maya, and Briza. Being female, they were bigger and stronger than Dinan, and had trained all their lives in the use of wicked Drow clerical powers and weapons. Dinan watched as enchanted extensions of the clerics, the dreaded snake-headed whips on his sister's belts, began writhing in anticipation of the punishment they would exact. The handles were adamantine, and the punishment and ordinary enough, but the whip's length and multiple heads were living serpents. Briza's whip, in particular, a wicked six-headed device, danced and squirmed, tying itself into knots around the belt that held it. Briza was always the quickest to punish. Matron Malice, however, seemed pleased by Dinan's swagger. The second boy knew his place well, enough by her measure, and followed her commands fearlessly and without question. Dinan took comfort in the calmness of his mother's face, quite the opposite of the shining white-hot faces of his three sisters. All is ready, he said to her. House DeVere huddles within its fence, except for Alton, of course, foolishly attending his studies at Sorcerer. You have met with the Faceless One? Matron Malice asked. The Academy is quiet this night, Dinan replied. Our meeting went off perfectly. He agreed to our contract? Alton DeVere will be dealt with accordingly, Dinan chuckled. He then remembered the slight alteration he had made in Matron Malice's plans, delaying Alton's execution for the sake of his own lust for added cruelty. Dinan's thought evoked another recollection as well. High Priestesses of Lolth had an unnerving talent for reading thoughts. Alton will die tonight. Dinan quickly completed the answer, assuring the others before they could probe him for more definite details. Excellent, Briza growled. Dinan breathed a little easier. To the meld, Matron Malice ordered. The 4 Drow males moved to kneel before Matron and her daughters. Reason to Malice, Zaknafane to Briza, Nalfane to Maya, and Dinan to Vierna. The clerics chanted in unison, placing one hand delicately upon the forehead of the respective soldier, tuning into his passions. You know your places, Matron Malice said when the ceremony was completed. She grimaced through the pain of another contraction. Let our work begin. Hey Soul, welcome in. We're doing some nice chill reading this morning. Reading The Legend of Drizzt, Book 1, Homeland. Less than an hour later, Zaknafane and Briza stood together on the balcony outside the upper entrance of House de Warden. Below them, on the cavern floor, the 2nd and 3rd Brigades of the family army, Reasons and Nalfanes, bustled about, fitting on heated leather straps and metal patches, camouflage against the distinctive elven form to the heat-sensing drow eyes. Dinan's group, the initial strike force that included 100 goblin slaves, had long since departed. Will be known after this night, Briza said. None would have suspected that the 10th house would dare move against one as powerful as DeVere. When the whispers ripple out after this night's bloody work, even, Bainre, Even, Bainer will take note of Darum and Nashez Baranon, which is House de Warden's ancestral name. She leaned out over the balcony to watch as 2 brigades formed into lines and started out, silently along separate paths that would bring them through the winding city to the Mushroom Grove and the 5-pillared structure of House DeVere. Zaknafane eyed the back of Matron Malice's eldest daughter, wanting nothing more than to put a dagger into her spine. As always, though, good judgment kept Zak's practiced hand in place. Have you the articles? Briza inquired, showing Zak considerably more respect than she had when Matron Malice sat protectively at her side. Zak was only a male, a commoner allowed to don the family's name as his own because he sometimes served Matron Malice in a husbandly manner and had once been the patron of the house. Husbandly manner means exactly what you think it is. Hehehe. Still, Briza feared to anger him. Zak was a weapons master of the House de Warden, a tall and muscular male, stronger than most females, and those who have witnessed his fighting wrath considered him among the finest warriors of either sex in all of Menzoberranzan. Besides, Briza and her mother, both high priestesses of the Spider Queen, Zaknafane with his unrivaled swordsmanship was House de Warden's trump. Zak held up the black hood and opened a small pouch on his belt, revealing several tiny ceramic spheres. Briza smiled evilly, rubbing her slender hands together. Matron Jinnife will not be pleased, she whispered. Zak returned the smile and turned to view the departing soldiers. Nothing gave the weapons master more pleasure than killing drow elves, particularly clerics of Lolth. Prepare yourself, Briza said after a few minutes. Zak shook his thick hair from his face and stood rigid, eyes tightly closed. Briza drew her wand slowly, beginning the chant that would activate the device. She tapped Zak on one shoulder and then on the other, then held the wand motionless over his head. Zak felt the frosty sprinkles fall down around him, permeating his clothes and armor, even his flesh, until he and all of his possessions had cooled to the uniform temperature and hue. Zack hated the magical chill. It felt as if he imagined death would feel, but he knew that under the influence of the wand's sprinkles, he was, to the heat-sensing eyes of the creatures of the Underdark, as gray as common stone, unremarkable, undetectable. Zack opened his eyes and shuddered, flexing his fingers to be sure they could still perform the fine edge of his craft. He looked back to Briza, already in the midst of the second spell, the summoning. This one would take a while, so Zack leaned back against the wall, considering again the pleasant, though dangerous task before him. How thoughtful of Matron Malice to leave all of House de Vere's clerics to him. It is done, Briza announced after a few minutes. She led Zack's gaze upward, to the darkness beneath the unseen ceiling of the immense cavern. Zack spotted Briza's handiwork at first, an approaching current of air, yellow-tinted and warmer than the normal air of the cavern. A living current of air. The creature, a conjuration from an elemental plane, swirled to hover just beyond the lip of the balcony, obediently waiting its summoner's commands. Zack didn't hesitate. He leaped out into the thing's mist, letting it hold him suspended above the floor. Briza offered him a final salute, and motioned her servant away. Good fighting, she called to Zack, though he was already invisible in the air above her. Zack chuckled at the irony of her words as the twisting city of Menzoberranzan rolled out below him. She wanted the clerics of House de Vere dead as surely as Zack did, but for very different reasons. All complications aside, Zack would have been just as happy killing the clerics of House de Werden. The weapons master took up one of his adamantine swords, a drow weapon magically crafted and unbelievably sharp with the edge of killing Dwemmers. Good fighting indeed, he whispered. If only Briza knew how good. That's the end of the first chapter. Oh my gosh, they're really going through introducing all the characters. I'm gonna take a bite of cookie because I have these cookies I bought yesterday from Crumble. And really, I put them in bags so I could sneak them into a movie theater, and they got all sorts of crushed up. It is a really good book. It's definitely, I'm trying to get back to when I first started my stream, I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I would like those vibes again. So I figured something like this would be a good, epic fantasy with a little bit of chill morning vibes. Don't mind me in my snack break. Alright. Chapter 2. The Fall of House de Vere. Dinan noted with satisfaction that any of the meandering bugbears, or any of the multitudes of races that composed Menzoberranzan, Drow included, now made great haste to scurry out of his way. This time, the second boy of House de Werden was not alone. Nearly 60 soldiers of the house walked in tight lines behind him. Behind these, in similar order, though with far less enthusiasm for the adventure, came 100 armed slaves of lesser races, goblins, orcs, bugbears. There could be no doubt for onlookers. A drow house was on the march to war. This was not an everyday event in Menzoberranzan, but neither was it unexpected. At least once every decade, a house decided that its position within the city hierarchy could be improved with another house's elimination. It was a risky proposition, for all of the nobles of the victim house had to be disposed of quickly and quietly. If even one survived to lay an accusation upon the perpetrator, the attacking house would be eradicated by Menzoberranzan's merciless system of justice. The raid was executed to devious perfection, though no recourse could be forthcoming. All of the city, even the ruling council of the top eight matron mothers, would secretly applaud the attackers for their courage and intelligence, and no more would ever be said of the incident. Dinan took a roundabout route, not wanting to lay a direct trail between House Do'Urden and House Devere. A half hour later, for the second time that night, he crept into the mushroom grove's southern end, with a cluster of stalagmites that held House Devere. His soldiers streamed out behind him eagerly, readying weapons and taking full measure of the structure before them. The slaves were slower in their movements. Many of them looked about for some escape, for they knew in their hearts that they were doomed in this battle. They feared the wrath of the Dark Elves more than the death itself, though, and would not attempt to flee. With every exit out of the Menzoberranzan protected by devious Drow magic, where could they possibly go? Every one of them had witnessed the brutal punishments the Drow Elves exacted on recaptured slaves. At Dinan's command, they jumped into their positions around the mushroom fence. Dinan reached into his large pouch and pulled out a heated sheet of metal. He flashed the object, brightened in the infrared spectrum 3 times behind him to signal the approaching brigades of Nalfane and Risen. Then, with his usual cockiness, Dinan spun it quickly into the air, caught it, and placed it in the secrecy of his heat-shielding pouch. On cue, with the twirling signal, Dinan's Drow brigade fitted the enchanted darts into their tiny handheld crossbows and took aim on the appointed targets. Every 5th mushroom was a shrieker. Every dart held magical dwemer that could silence the roar of a dragon. 2, 3, Dinan counted, his hands signaling the tempo since no words could be heard within the sphere of magical silence cast about his troop. He imagined the click as the drawing strings on his little weapon released, loosing the dart into the nearest shrieker. So it went all around the cluster of House Devere, the first line of alarm systematically silenced by 3 dozen enchanted darts. Ooh. Almost all the Forgotten Realms series are awesome. I'm so excited to get on to when, Drizzt is, actually, out of the Underdark. Because I know, I know, how the first book ends, him leaving Menzoberranzan for reasons we'll get to. I never actually finished reading Exile, so I don't know how he goes from there, but I'm really excited to see, because my partner's told me a lot about the whole Legend of Drizzt series and all the different cool characters that get brought up. Alright. Halfway across Menzoberranzan, Matron Malice, her daughters, and 4 of the house's common clerics were gathered in Lolth's unholy circle of 8. They ringed an idol of their wicked deity, a gemstone carving of a drow-faced spider, and called to Lolth for aid in their struggles. Malice sat at the head, propped in a chair angled for birthing. Briza and Virna flanked her, Briza clutching her hand. The select group chanted in unison, combining their energies into a single offensive spell. A moment later, when Virna, mentally linked to Dinan, understood the first attack group was in position, the Do'Urden Circle of 8 sent the first insinuating waves of mental energy into the rival house. Matron Jennifer, her 2 daughters, and the 5 principal clerics of the common troops of House Devere huddled together in the darkened anteroom of the 5 Stalagmite House's main chapel. They had gathered there in solemn prayer every night since Matron Jennifer learned that she had fallen into Lolth's disfavor. Jennifer understood how vulnerable her house remained until she could find a way to appease the Spider Queen. There were 66 other houses in Menzoberranzan, fully 20 of which might dare to attack House Devere at such an obvious disadvantage. The 8 clerics were anxious now, somehow suspecting that this night would be eventful. Jennifer felt it first, a chilling blast of confusing perception that caused her to stutter over her prayer of forgiveness. The other clerics of House Devere glanced nervously at the matron's uncharacteristic slip of words, looking for confirmation. We are under attack, Jennifer breathed to them, her head already pounding with a dull ache of the growing assault of formidable clerics of House Do'Urden. All right, they know now. A second signal from Dinan put the slave troops into motion. Still using stealth as their ally, they quietly rushed to the mushroom fence and cut through with wide-bladed swords. The second boy of House Do'Urden watched and enjoyed as the courtyard of House Devere was easily penetrated. Not such a prepared guard, he whispered in silent sarcasm to the red glowing gargoyles on the high walls. The statues had seemed such an ominous guard earlier that night. Now they just watched helplessly. Dinan recognized the measured but growing anticipation in the soldiers around him. Their Drow battle lust was barely contained. Every now and came. Sorry, that just is worded funny. Every now and came a flash of one of the slaves tumbling over a warding glyph, but the second boys and other Drow only laughed at the spectacle. The lesser races were the expendable fodder of House Do'Urden. House Do'Urden's army. The only purpose in bringing the goblinoids of House Devere was to trigger the deadly traps and defenses along the perimeter, and lead the way for the Drow elves, the true soldiers. The fence was now opened and secrecy thrown away. House Devere soldiers met the invading slaves head-on within the compound. Dinan barely had his hand up to begin the attack command when his 60 anxious Drow warriors jumped up and charged, their faces twisted in wicked glee and their weapons waving menacingly. They halted their approach on cue, though remembering one final task set out before them. Every Drow, noble or commoner, possessed certain magical abilities. Bringing forth a glow of darkness as Dinan had done to the bugbears in the streets earlier that night, came easily to even the lowliest of the Dark Elves. So it went now, with 60 Do'Urden soldiers blotting out the perimeter of House Devere above the mushroom fence in a ball after ball darkness. For all of their stealth and precautions, House Do'Urden knew that many eyes were watching the raid. Witnesses were not too much a problem. They would not care enough to identify the attacking house. But custom and rules demanded certain attempts at secrecy be enacted, the etiquette of Drow warfare. In the blink of a red-glowing Drow eye, House Devere became to the rest of the city a dark blot on Menzo Brandon's landscape. Reason came up behind his youngest son. Well done, he signaled in the intricate finger language of the Drow. Nalfane is in through the back. An easy victory, the cocky Dinan signaled back. If Matron Jennifer and her clerics are held at bay. Trust in Matron Malice, was Reason's response. He clapped his son's shoulder and followed his troops in through the breached mushroom fence. High above the cluster of House Devere, Zacnafane rested comfortably in the current arms of Briza's aerial servant, watching the drama unfold. From this vantage, Zac could see the ring of darkness and could hear within the ring of magical silence. Dinan's troops, the first Drow soldiers in, had met resistance at every door and were being beaten badly. Nalfane and his brigade, the troops of House Do'Urden most practiced in the ways of wizardry, came in through the fence at the rear of the complex. Lightning strikes and magical balls of acid thundered into the courtyard at the base of the Devere structures, cutting down Do'Urden fodder and Devere defenses alike. In the front courtyard, Risen and Dinan commanded the finest fighters of House Do'Urden. The blessings of Lolth were with his house. Zac could see when the battle was fully joined, for the strikes of the soldiers of House Do'Urden came faster than those of their enemies, and their aim proved more deadly. In minutes, the battle had been taken fully inside the 5 pillars. Zac stretched the incessant chill out of his arms and willed the aerial servant to action. Down he plummeted onto his windy bed, and he fell free the last few feet onto the terrace at the top chambers of the central pillar. At once, 2 guards, one a female, rushed out to greet him. They hesitated in confusion, though, trying to sort out the true form of this unremarkable gray blur. Too long. They had never heard of Zacnafane Do'Urden. They didn't know that death was upon them. Zack's whip flashed out, catching and gashing the female's throat, while his other hand walked his sword through a series of masterful thrusts and parries that put the male off balance. Zack finished both in a single blurring movement, snapping the whip-entwined female from the terrace with a twist of his wrist, spinning a kick into the male's face that likewise dropped him to the cavern floor. Zack was then inside. There was another guard rose up to meet him, but fell at his feet. Zack slipped along the curving wall of the stalactite tower, his cooled body blending perfectly with the stone. Soldiers of House Devere rushed all about him, trying to formulate some defense against the host of intruders who had already won out the lowest level of every structure and had taken 2 of the pillars completely. Zack was not concerned with them. He blocked out the clanging ring of adamantine weapons, the cries of command, the screams of death, concentrating instead on the singular sound that would lead him to his destination, a unified, frantic chant. He found an empty corridor covered with spider carvings and running into the center of the pillar. As in House de Warden, this corridor ended in the large set of ornate double doors, their decorations dominated by arachnid forms. This must be the place, Zack muttered under his breath, fitting his hood to the top of his head. A giant spider rushed out of its concealment to his side. Zack dived to his belly and kicked out under the thing, spinning into a roll that plunged his sword deep into the monster's bulbous belly. Sticky fluids gushed out over the weapons master, and the spider shuddered to a quick death. Yes, Zack whispered, wiping the spider juices from his face. This must be the place. He pulled the dead monster back into its hidden cubby and slipped in beside the thing, hoping that no one had noticed the brief struggle. By the sounds of ringing weapons, Zack could tell that the fighting had almost reached this floor. House Devere seemed to have its defenses in place, though, and was finally holding its ground. Now, Malice, Zack whispered, hoping that Briza, attuned to him in the meld, would sense his anxiety. Let us not be late. Oh my gosh. Back in the clerical anteroom of House de Warden, Malice and their subordinates continued their brutal mental assault on the clerics of House Devere. Lolth heard their prayers louder than those of their counterparts, giving the clerics of House de Warden the stronger spells in their mental combats. Already they had easily put their enemies into defensive posture. One of the lesser priestesses in Devere's Circle of Eight had been crushed by Briza's mental insinuations, and now lay dead on the floor, barely inches from Matron Jennifer's feet. But the momentum had slowed suddenly, and the battle seemed to be swinging back to an even level. Matron Malice, struggling with the impending birth, could not hold her concentration. Without her voice, the spells of her unholy circle weakened. At her mother's side, powerful Briza clutched her mother's hand so tightly that all of the blood was squeezed from it, leaving it cool, the only cool spot on the laboring female, to the eyes of the others. Briza studied the contractions and the crowning cap of the coming child's white hair, and calculated the time to the moment of birth. This technique of translating the pain of birth into an offensive spell attack had never been tried before, except in legend, and Briza knew that the timing would be a critical factor. She whispered into her mother's ear, coaxing out the words of a deadly incantation. Matron Malice echoed back the beginnings of the spell, sublimating her gasps and transforming her rage of agony into offensive power. Dinnen doort mach brechen tol, Briza implored. Dinnen doort mach brechen tol, Malice growled, so determined to focus through the pain that she bit through one of her thin lips. The baby's head appeared, more fully this time, and this time to stay. Briza trembled and could barely remember the incantation herself. She remembered the final rune. She whispered the final rune into Matron's ear, almost fearing the consequences. Malice gathered her breath and her courage. She could feel the tingling of the spell as clearly as the pain of the birth. To her daughters standing around the idol, staring at her in disbelief, she appeared as the red blur of heated fury, streaking sweat lines that shone brightly as the heat of boiling water. "Ah, Beck," the matron began, feeling pressure building to a crescendo. "Ah, Beck." She felt a hot tear of her skin, the slippery release as a baby's head pushed through, sudden ecstasy of birthing. "Ah, Beck, dina breg do word." Alice screamed, pushing away all of the agony in a final explosion of magical power that knocked even the clerics of her own house from their feet. Ah, yes, I do gotta get some sips of water in. Thank you, Soul, I do appreciate that. You forget that when you're reading, your throat gets so dry. Carried on the thrust of Matron Mallow's exultation, the Dwemer thundered into the chapel of House de Vere, shattered the gemstone idol of Lolth, and sundered the double doors into heaps of twisted metal, and threw Matron Jennifer and her overmatched subordinates to the floor. Zack shook his head in disbelief at the chapel doors as the chapel doors flew past him. "Quite a kick, Malice." He chuckled and spun around the entryway into the chapel. Using his infravision, he took a quick survey and head count of the lightless room's 7 living occupants, all struggling back to their feet, their robes tattered. Again, shaking his head at the bared power of Matron Malice, Zack pulled his hood down over his face. A snap of his whip was the only explanation he offered as he smashed a tiny ceramic globe at its feet. The sphere shattered, dropping out a pellet that Briza had enchanted for such an occasion. The pellet glowing with brightness of daylight. Her eyes, accustomed to blackness, tuned into heat emanations. The intrusion of such radiance came in a blinding flash of agony. The cleric's cries of pain only aided Zack in his systematic trek around the room. He smiled widely under his hood every time he felt his sword bite into Drow flesh. He heard the beginnings of the spell across the way and knew that one of the de Veres had recovered enough from the assault to be dangerous. The weapons master did not need his eyes to aim, however, and the crack of his whip took Matron Jennifer's tongue right out of her mouth. Damn, okay. Briza placed the newborn on the back of the spider idol and lifted the ceremonial dagger, pausing to admire its cruel workmanship. Its hilt was a spider's body, sporting 8 legs, barbed as to appear furred, but angled down to serve as blades. Briza lifted the instrument above the baby's chest. "Name the child," she implored her mother. "The Spider Queen will not accept a sacrifice until the child is named." Matron Malice lolled her head, trying to fathom her daughter's meaning. The matron mother had thrown everything into the moment of the spell and the birth, and she was now barely coherent. "Name the child," Briza commanded, anxious to feed her hungry goddess. "It nears its end," Dinan said to his brothers when they met in the lower hall of one of the lesser pillars of House de Vere. "Risen is winning through the top, and it is believed that Zaknafane's dark work has been completed. 200 of House de Vere's soldiers have already turned allegiance to us," Nalthane replied. They see the end," laughed Dinan. "One house serves them as well as another. In the eyes of commoners, no house is worth dying for. Our task will be finished soon." "Too quickly for anyone to take note," Nalthane said. "Now, Doorden Daerman Nashez Baranon is the 9th house of Menzo Baranzan, and de Vere be damned." "Alert!" Dinan cried suddenly, his eyes widening in feigned horror as he looked over his brother's shoulder. Nalthane reacted immediately, spinning to face the danger at his back, only to put the true danger at his back. For even as Nalthane realized the deception, Dinan's sword slipped into his spine. Dinan put his head to his brother's shoulder and pressed his cheek to Nalthane's, watching the red sparkle of heat leave his brother's eyes. "Too quickly for anyone to take note," Dinan teased, echoing his brother's earlier words. He dropped the lifeless form to his feet. Now Dinan is elder boy of House de Warden, and Nalfane be damned. And that's how it is in Drow culture, at least in this book. Whenever I, do Dungeons and Dragons and I, roleplay my own Drow culture, I'd make it less just blatantly evil, because I feel like an objectively evil race is just, problematic in so many ways. Granted, they're like, oh, but, Drizzt is a good guy. Like, the only one. Drizzt, breathed Matron Malice. The child's name is Drizzt. Briza tightened her grip on the knife and began the ritual. Queen of spiders, take this babe, she began. She raised the dagger to strike. Drizzt de Warden, we give you in payment for our glorious Wait! Called Maya from the side of the room. Her melding with her brother Nalfane had abruptly ceased. It could only mean one thing. Nalfane is dead, she announced. The baby is no longer the third living son. Vierna glanced curiously at her sister. At the same instant that Maya had sensed Nalfane's death, Vierna, melded with Dinan, had felt a strong emotional surge. Elation? Vierna brought up a slender finger to her pursed lips, wondering if Dinan had successfully pulled off the assassination. Briza still held the spider-shaped knife over the babe's chest, wanting to give this one to Lolth. We promised the Spider Queen the third living son, Maya warned, and that has been given. But not in sacrifice, argued Briza. Vierna shrugged at a loss. If Lolth accepted Nalfane, then he has been given. To give another might evoke the Spider Queen's anger. But not to give what we had promised would be worse still, Briza insisted. Then finish the deed, said Maya. Briza clenched down tight on the dagger and began the ritual again. Stay your hand, Matron Malice commanded, propping herself up in the chair. Lolth is content. Our victory is won. Welcome then, your brother, the newest member of House de Warden. Just a male, Briza commented in obvious disgust, walking away from the idol and the child. Next time we shall do better, Matron Malice chuckled, though she wondered if there would be a next time. She approached the end of her 5th century of life, and Drow elves, even young ones, were not a particularly fruitful lot. Briza had been born to Malice at the youthful age of 100, but in almost 4 centuries since, Malice had produced only 5 other children. Even this baby, Drizzt, had come as a surprise, and Malice hardly expected she would ever conceive again. Enough of such contemplations, Malice whispered to herself, exhausted. There will be ample time. She sank back into her chair and fell into a fitful, though wickedly pleasant, dreams of heightening power. Hey Brian, welcome in. Finally Friday. Love the reading so far. It's so fun. We're getting back into it, you know? Zaknapane walked through the central pillar of the Veer complex, his hood in his hand, his whip and sword comfortably replaced on his belt. Sorry. Every now and a ring of battle sounded, only to be quickly ended. House de Warden had rolled through a victory. The 10th house had taken the 4th, and now all that remained was to remove evidence and witnesses. One group of lesser female clerics marched through, tending to the wounded de Wardens and animating the corpses of those beyond their ability, so that the bodies could walk away from the crime scene. Back at the de Warden compound, those corpses not beyond repair would be resurrected and put back to work. Zack turned away with a visible shudder as the clerics moved from room to room, the marching line of de Warden zombies growing even longer at their backs. As distasteful as Zaknapane found this troop, the one that followed was even worse. 2 de Warden clerics had led a contingent of soldiers through the structure, using detection spells to determine hiding places of surviving Devirs. One stopped in the hallway just a few steps from Zack. Her eyes turned inward as she felt the emanations of her spell. She held her fingers out in front of her, tracing a slow line, like some macabre divining rod, towards Drow flesh. "In there," she declared, pointing to a panel at the base of the wall. The soldiers jumped to it like a pack of ravenous wolves and tore through the secret door. Inside his hidden cubbyhole huddled the children of House de Vere. These were nobles, not commoners, and could not be taken alive. Zack quickened his pace to get beyond the scene, but he heard vividly the children's helpless screams as hungry Do'Urden soldiers finished their job. Zack found himself in a run now. He rushed around a bend in the hallway, nearly bowling over Dinan and Risen. "Nalfane is dead," Risen declared impassively. Zack immediately turned a suspicious eye on the younger Do'Urden son. "I killed the de Vere soldier who committed the deed," Dinan assured him, not even hiding his cocky smile. Zack had been around for nearly 4 centuries, and he was certainly not ignorant to the ways of his ambitious race. The brother princes had come in defensively at the back of the lines, with a host of Do'Urden soldiers between them and the enemy. By the time they even encountered a drow that was not one of their own house, the majority of de Vere's surviving soldiers had already switched allegiance to House Do'Urden. Zack doubted that either of the Do'Urden brothers had even seen action against a de Vere. The description of the carnage in the prayer room had been spread throughout the ranks, Risen said to the weapons master. You performed with your usual excellence, as we have come to expect." Zack shot the patron a glare of contempt and kept his way, down through the structure's main doors and out beyond the magical darkness and silence into Menzoberranzan's dark dawn. Risen was Matron Malice's present partner in a long line of partners, and no more. When Malice was finished with him, she would either relegate him back to the ranks of the common soldiery, stripping him of the name Do'Urden and all the rights that accompanied it, or she would dispose of him. Zack owed him no respect. Zack moved out beyond the mushroom fence to a higher vantage point he could find, then fell to the ground. He watched, amazed, a few moments later when the procession of the Do'Urden army, patron and son, soldiers and clerics, and the slow-moving line of 24 drow zombies made its way back home. They had lost and left behind nearly all of their slave fodder in the attack, but the line leaving the wreckage of House de Vere was longer than the line that had come in earlier that night. The slaves had been replaced twofold by captured de Vere slaves, and 50 or more of the de Vere common troops, showing typical drow loyalty, had willingly joined the attackers. These traitorous drows would be interrogated, magically interrogated, by the Do'Urden clerics to ensure their sincerity. It would pass the test to a 1, Zack knew. Drow elves were creatures of survival, not of principle. The soldiers would be given new identities and would be kept within the privacy of Do'Urden compound for a few months, until the fall of House de Vere became an old and forgotten tale. Zack did not follow immediately. Rather, he cut through the rows of mushroom trees and found a secluded dell, where he plopped down on a patch of mossy carpet and raised his gaze to the eternal darkness of the cavern ceiling, the eternal darkness of his existence. It would have been prudent for him to remain silent at that time. He was an invader to the most powerful section of the vast city. He thought of the possible witnesses to his words, the same dark elves who had watched the fall of House de Vere, who had wholeheartedly enjoyed the spectacle. In the face of such behavior and such carnage as the night had seen, Zack could not contain his emotions. His lament came out as a plea to some god beyond his experience. "What place is that in my world? What dark coil has my spirit embodied?" He whispered the angry disclaimer that had always been part of him. "In light, I can see my skin is black. In darkness, it glows white in the heat of this rage I cannot dismiss. Would that I had the courage to depart, this place or this life, to stand openly against the wrongness that is the world of these, my kin. To seek an existence that does not run afoul to that which I believe, and to that which I hold dear faith is truth. Zack Nafane Do'Urden I am called, yet a drow I am not, by choice or by deed. Let them discover this being that I am then. Let them rain their wrath on these shoulders, old shoulders already burdened by the hopelessness of Menzoberranzan." Ignoring the consequences, the weapons master rose to his feet and yelled, "Menzoberranzan! What hell are you?" A moment later, no answer echoed out of the quiet city. Zack flexed the remaining chill of Breeze's wand from his weary muscles. He found some comfort as he patted the whip on his belt, the instrument that had taken the tongue out of the mouth of a matron mother. Wow, 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 wow. So yes, we see this guy, Zack Nefane, who has the name of Do'Urden, but he's not blood related. The reason why he's kept around is A, he's a great weapons master, and B, Matron Malice likes to roll in the hay with him. But he's not the current patron, that's a reason. And Zack Nefane he's not, I wouldn't say he's good, but he detests the evil that he sees in Drow culture and Drow society. The only reason why he continues to participate is, like, some sort of pleasure he derived from, like, murdering Drow clerics. Ow. Ugh. Okay. I'm just looking at how long the chapters are. What we'll be reading. How long is Homeland? How many chapters? Right, there's 29 chapters. Okay, okay. Well, we'll for sure read one more, because we gotta know what happens to Alton Devere. Alright. Massage, the young apprentice, which at this point in his magic-using career meant that he was no more than a cleaning attendant, leaned on his broom and watched as Alton Devere moved through the door into the highest chamber of the spire. Massage almost felt sympathy for the student, but had to go in and face the faceless one. Massage felt excitement as well, though knowing that the ensuing fireworks between Alton and the Faceless Master would be well worth the watching. He went back to his sweeping, using the broom as an excuse to get further around the curve of the room's floor, closer to the door. You requested my presence, Master Faceless One? Alton Devere said, again keeping one hand in front of his face and squinting to fight the brilliant glare of the room's 3 lighted candles. Alton shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other, just inside the shadowy room's door. Hunched across the way, the Faceless One kept his back to the young Devere. Better to be done with this cleanly, the master reminded himself. He knew, though, that the spell he was now preparing to kill Alton before the student... that the spell he was now preparing would kill Alton before the student could learn his family's fate. Before the Faceless One could fully complete Dean Do'Urden's final instructions. Too much was at stake. Better to be done with this cleanly. Alton began again, but he prudently held his words and tried to sort out the situation before him. How unusual to be summoned to the private chambers of the Master of the Academy before the day's lessons had even begun. When he had first received the summons, Alton feared that he had somehow failed one of his lessons. That could be a fatal mistake in Sorcerer. Alton was close to graduation, but the disdain of a single master could put an end to that. He had done quite well in his lessons with the Faceless One, had even believed that this mysterious master favored him. Could this call be simply a courtesy of congratulations on his impending graduation? Unlikely, Alton realized against his hopes. Masters of the Drow Academy did not often congratulate students. Alton then heard quiet chanting and noticed the master was in the midst of spellcasting. Something cried out as very wrong to him now. Something about this whole situation did not fit the strict ways of the Academy. Alton set his feet firmly and tensed his muscles, following the advice of the motto that had been drilled into the thoughts of every student at the Academy. The precept that kept Drow elves alive in a society so devoted to chaos. Be prepared. The doors exploded before him, showering the room with stone splinters and throwing Massage back against the wall. He felt the show well worth both the inconvenience and the new bruise on his shoulder when Alton DeVere scrambled out of the room. The student's back and left arm trailed wisps of smoke. The most exquisite expression of terror and pain that Massage had ever seen was etched into the DeVere's noble face. Alton stumbled to the floor and kicked into a roll, desperate to put some ground between himself and the murderous master. He made it down and around the descending arc of the room's floor, and through the door that led into the next lower chamber, just as the Faceless One made his appearance at the sundered door. The master stopped to spit a curse at his misfire, and to consider the best way to replace his door. "Clean it up," he snapped at Massage, who was again leaning casually with his hand atop his broomstick and his chin atop his hands. Massage obediently dropped his head and started sweeping the stone splinters. He looked up as the Faceless One stalked past, however, and cautiously started after the master. Alton couldn't possibly escape. This show would be too good to miss. The third room, the Faceless One's private library, was the brightest of the four in the spider, with dozens of candles burning on each wall. "Damn this light," Alton spat, stumbling his way back down the dizzying blur to the door that led to the Faceless One's entry hall, the lowest room of the master's quarters. If you could get down from the spire and outside the tower to the courtyard of the academy, he might be able to turn the momentum against the master. Alton's world remained in the darkness of Menzo Baranzan, but the Faceless One, who had spent so many decades in the candlelight of Sorcerre, had grown accustomed to using his eyes to see shades of light, not heat. The entry hall was cluttered with chairs and chests, but only one candle burned there, and Alton could see clearly enough to dodge or leap any obstacles. He rushed to the door and grabbed the heavy latch. It turned easily enough, but when Alton tried to shoulder through, the door did not budge, and a burst of sparkling blue energy threw him back to the floor. "Curse this place," Alton spat. The portal was magically held. He knew a spell to open such enchanted doors, but doubted whether his magic would be strong enough to dispel the castings of a master. In his haste and fear, the words of the Dwemer floated through Alton's thoughts in an indecipherable jumble. "Do not run, DeVere," came the Faceless One's call from the previous chamber. "You only lengthen your torment." "A curse upon you too," Alton replied under his breath. Alton forgot about that stupid spell. It would never come to him in time. He glanced around the room for an option. His eyes found something unusual halfway up the side wall, in an opening between two large cabinets. Alton scrambled back a few steps to get a better angle, but found himself caught within the range of the candlelight, within the deceptive field where his eyes registered both heat and light. He could only discern that this section of the wall showed a uniform glow in the heat spectrum, and that its hue was subtly different from the stone of the walls. Another doorway? Alton could only hope this guess to be right. He rushed back to the center of the room and stood directly across from the object, and forced his eyes away from the infrared spectrum, fully back into the world of light. As his eyes adjusted, what came into view both startled and confused the young DeVere. He saw no doorway, nor any opening with another chamber behind it. What he looked upon was a reflection of himself, in a portion of the room he now stood in. Alton had never, in his 55 years of life, witnessed such a spectacle, but he had heard the masters of Sorcerre speak of these devices. It was a mirror. A movement in the upper doorway of the chamber reminded Alton that the Faceless One was almost upon him. He couldn't hesitate to ponder his options. He put his head down and charged the mirror. Perhaps it was a teleportation door to another section of the city. Perhaps a simple door to a room beyond. Or perhaps, Alton dared to imagine in those few desperate seconds, this was some interplanar gate that would bring him into a strange and unknown plane of existence. He felt the tingling excitement of adventure pulling him on as he neared the wondrous thing. Then he felt only the impact, the shattering glass and the unyielding stone wall behind it. Perhaps it was just a mirror. Alright. Look at his eyes. This is switching scenes. Vierna whispered to Maya as they examined the newest member of House de Warden. Truly, the babe's eyes were remarkable. Though the child had been out of the womb for less than an hour, the pupils of his orbs darted back and forth inquisitively. While they showed the expected radiating glows of eyes seeing from the infrared spectrum, the familiar redness was tinted by a shade of blue, giving them a violent hue. Blind? Wondered Maya. Perhaps this one will be given to the Spider Queen still. Frieza looked back to them anxiously. Dark elves did not allow children showing any physical deficiency to live. Not blind, replied Vierna, passing her hand over the child and casting an angry glare at both of her sisters. He follows my fingers. Maya saw that Vierna spoke the truth. She leaned closer to the babe, studying his face in strange eyes. What do you see, Drizzt de Warden? She asked softly, not in an act of gentleness towards the babe, but so that she would not disturb her mother, resting in the chair at the head of the spider idol. What do you see that the rest of us cannot? Glass crunched under Alton, digging deeper wounds as he shifted in his weight in an effort to rise to his feet. What would it matter, he thought. My mirror! He heard the faceless one groan, and he looked up to see the outraged master towering over him. How huge he seemed to Alton, how great and powerful, fully blocking the candlelight from his little alcove between the cabinets. His form enhanced tenfold to the eyes of the helpless victim by the mere implications of his presence. Alton then felt a gooey substance floating down around him, detached webbing finding sticky hold on the cabinets, on the walls, and on Alton. The young Devere tried to leap up and roll away, but the faceless one's spell was already held him fast, trapped him as a durget fly would be trapped in the strands of a spider's home. Burst my door, the faceless one growled at him. Now this mirror? My mirror? Do you know the pains I suffered to acquire such a rare device? Alton turned his head from side to side, but not in answer, but to free at least his face from the binding substance. Why did you not just stand still and let the deed be finished cleanly? The faceless one roared, thoroughly disgusted. Why? Alton lisped, spitting some of the webbing from his thin lips. Why would you want to kill me? Because you broke my mirror, the faceless one shot back. It didn't make any sense, of course. The mirror had only been shattered after the initial attack. But to the master, Alton supposed, it didn't have to make sense. Alton knew his cause to be hopeless, but he continued on in his efforts to dissuade his opponent. You know of my house, of House de Vere, he said indignant. Fourth in the city. Matron Jennifer will not be pleased. A high priestess has ways to learn the truth of such situations. House de Vere? The faceless one laughed. Perhaps the torments that Dean and Doorden had requested would be in line after all. Alton had broken his mirror. Fourth house, Alton spat. Foolish youth. The faceless one cackled. House de Vere is no more. Not fourth, not 54th. Nothing. Alton slumped through the webbing that did its best to hold his body erect. What could this master be babbling about? They are all dead, the faceless one taunted. Matron Jennifer sees Loth more clearly this day. Alton's expression of horror pleased the disfigured master. All dead, he snarled one more time. Except for poor Alton, who lives on to hear his family's misfortune. That oversight shall be remedied now. The faceless one raised his hand to cast a spell. Who? Alton cried. The faceless one paused and seemed not to understand. What house did this? The doomed student clarified. Or what conspiracy of houses brought down de Vere? Ah, you should be told, replied the faceless one, obviously enjoying the situation. I suppose it is your right to know before you join your kin in the realm of death. He smiled. A smile widened across the opening where his lips had once been. But you broke my mirror, the master growled. Die stupid boy. Find your own answers. The faceless one's chest jerked out suddenly, and he shuddered in convulsions, babbling curses in a tongue far beyond the terrified student's comprehension. What vile spell did this disfigured master have prepared for him, so wretched that its chant sounded in an arcane language foreign to the learned Alton's ears. So unspeakably evil that its semantics jerked on the very edge of its caster's control. The faceless one then fell forward onto the floor and expired. Stunned, Alton followed the line of the master's hood down to its back, to the tail of a protruding dart. Alton watched the poison thing as it continued to shudder from the body's impact, and he turned his scan upward to the center of the room, where the young cleaning attendant stood calmly. "Nice weapon, faceless one," Massage beamed, rolling a two-handed crafted crossbow over in his hand. He threw a wicked smile at Alton and fitted another dart. "Oh, Drow." Alright, we got a couple more pages before chapter 4. Matron Malice hoisted herself out of the chair and willed herself to her feet. "Out of the way," she snapped at her daughters. Maya and Vierna scooted away from the spider idol and the baby. "See his eyes, Matron Mother," Vierna dared to remark. "They are so unusual." Matron Malice studied the child. Everything seemed in place. A good thing, too, for Nalfane, the elder boy of House Do'Urden, was dead, and this boy, Drizzt, would have a difficult job replacing the valuable son. "His eyes," Vierna said again. The matron shot her a venomous look, but bent low to see what the fuss was about. "Purple?" Malice said, startled. Never had she heard of such a thing. "He is not blind," Maya was quick to put in, seeing the disdain spreading across her mother's face. Fetch the candle," Matron Malice ordered. "Let us see how these eyes appear in the world of light." Maya and Vierna reflexively headed for the sacred cabinet, but Briza cut them off. "Only a high priestess might touch the holy items," she reminded them, in a tone that carried the weight of a threat. She spun around haughtily and reached into the cabinet and produced a single half-used red candle. The clerics hid their eyes, and Matron Malice put a prudent hand over the baby's face as Briza lit the sacred candle. It produced only a tiny flame, but to Drow eyes it came as a brilliant intrusion. "Bring it," said Matron Malice, after several moments of adjusting. Briza moved the candle near Drizzt, and Malice gradually slid her hand away. "He does not cry," Briza remarked, amazed that the babe could quietly accept such a stinging light. "Purple again," whispered the matron, paying no heed to her daughter's rambling. In both worlds, the child's eyes show as purple. Vierna gasped audibly when she looked again upon her tiny brother and his striking lavender orbs. "He is your brother," Matron Malice reminded her, viewing Vierna's gasp as a hint of what might come. "When he grows older and those eyes pierce you so, remember on your life that he is your brother." Vierna turned away, almost blurting a reply that she would have regretted making. Matron Malice's exploits with nearly every male soldier in the Do'Urden house, and many other that seductive matron managed to sneak away from other houses, were almost legendary in Menzoberranzan. Who was she to be spouting reminders of prudent and proper behavior? Vierna bit her lip and hoped that neither Briza nor Malice had been reading her thoughts in that moment. In Menzoberranzan, thinking such gossip about a high priestess, whether or not it was true, got you painfully executed. Her mother's eyes narrowed, and Vierna thought that she had been discovered. "He has years to prepare," Matron Malice said to her. "Maya is younger," Vierna dared to protest. "I could attain the levels of high priestess in but a few years if I keep to my studies." "Or never," the matron sternly reminded her. "Take the child to the chapel proper, wean him to words, and teach him all that he will need to know to properly serve as a page prince of House Do'Urden." "I will see to him," Briza offered, one hand subconsciously slipping to her snake-headed whip. "I do so enjoy teaching males their place in our world." Malice glared at her. "You are a high priestess. You have other duties more important than word-weaning a male child." Then to Vierna she said, "The babe is yours. Do not disappoint me in this. The lessons you teach Drizzt will reinforce your own understanding of our ways. This exercise at mothering will aid you in your quest to become a high priestess." She let Vierna take a moment to view the task in a more positive light. Then her tone became unmistakably threatening once again. It may aid you, but it surely can destroy you. Fiona sighed, but kept her thoughts silent. The chore that Matron Malice had dropped onto her shoulders would consume the bulk of her time for at least 10 years. Fiona didn't like the prospects. She and this purple-eyed child together for 10 long years. The alternative, however, the wrath of the Matron Malice de Warden, seemed a worse thing by far. So Vierna is going to raise Drizzt. Alton, we're back to Alton and Massage. Alton blew another web from his mouth. You are just a boy, an apprentice, he stammered. Why would you kill him? Massage finished the thought. Not to save you, if that is your hope. He spat down at the faceless one's body. Look at me, a prince of the 6th house, a cleaning steward for that wretched Hunette, Alton cut in. House Hunette is the 6th house. Drow put a finger over to pursed lips. Wait, he remarked, with a widening smile, an evil smile of sarcasm. We are 5th house now, I suppose, with De Vere wiped out. Not yet, Alton growled. Momentarily, Massage assured him, fingering the crossbow quarrel. Alton slumped even farther back in the web. To be killed by a master was bad enough, but the indignity of being shot down by a boy. I suppose I should thank you, Massage said. I'd planned to kill that one for many 10 days. Why? Alton pressed at his new assailant. Would you dare kill a master of Sorcerer simply because your family put you in servitude to him? Because he would snub me, Massage yelled. 4 years I have slaved for him, at the back end of a carrion crawler, cleaned his boots, prepared salve for his disgusting face. Was it ever enough? Not for that one. He spat at the corpse again and continued, talking more to himself than to the trapped students. Nobles aspiring to wizardry have the advantage of being trained as apprentices before they reach the proper age for entry into Sorcerer. Of course, Alton said. I trained myself under... He meant to keep me out of Sorcerer. Massage rambled, ignoring Alton altogether. He would have forced me into Melee Magthair, the fighter's school, instead. The fighter's school! My 25th birthday is only 10 days away. Massage looked up, as though he suddenly remembered that he was not alone in the room. I knew I must kill him, he continued, now speaking directly to Alton. Then you come along and make it all so convenient. A student and a master killing each other in a fight? It has happened before. Who would question it? I suppose then that I should thank you. Alton de Vere of no house worth mentioning. Massage chided in a low, sweeping blow. Before I kill you, I mean. Wait, cried Alton. Kill me to what gain? Alibi. But you have your alibi, and we can make it better. Explain, said Massage, who admittedly was in no particular hurry. The faceless one was a high-level wizard. The webs weren't going anywhere anytime soon. Free me, Alton said earnestly. Can you be as stupid as the faceless one proclaimed you? Alton took the insult stoically. The kid had the crossbow. Free me so that I may assume the faceless one's identity, he explained. The death of the master arouses suspicion, but if no master is believed dead... And what of this? Massage asked, kicking the corpse. Burn it, said Alton, his desperate plan fully coming into focus. Let it be Alton de Vere. House de Vere is no more. There will be no retaliation, no questions. Massage seemed skeptical. The faceless one was practically a hermit, Alton reasoned, and I am near to graduation. I am certain I can handle the simple chores of basic teaching after 30 years of study. And what is my gain? Alton gawked, nearly burying himself in the webbing, as if the answer were obvious. A master in Sorcerer to call mentor, one who can ease your way through your years of study, and one who can dispose of a witness at his earliest convenience, Massage added slyly. And what then would be my gain? Alton shot back. To anger House Hunette, 5th in all of the city, and I with no family at my back? No, young Massage, I am not as stupid as the faceless one named me. Massage ticked a long and pointed fingernail against his teeth, and considered the possibilities. An ally among the masters of Sorcerer? This held possibilities. Jackie, hi. Thank you so much for coming in this good fine morning. I will indeed take a sip. I'll drink the rest of the water that's in this bottle. Thanks for keeping me hydrated. Another thought popped in Massage's mind. He pulled open the cabinet to Alton's side and began rummaging through the contents. Alton flinched when he heard some ceramic and glass containers crashing together, thinking of the components, possibly even completed potions, that might be lost by the apprentice's carelessness. Perhaps Melee Magthair would be a better choice for this one, he thought. A moment later, though, the younger Drow reappeared, and Alton remembered that he was in no position to make such judgments. "This is mine," Massage demanded, showing Alton a small black object, a remarkably detailed onyx figurine of a hunting panther. "A gift from a denizen of the lower plains for some help I gave to him." "You aided such a creature?" Alton had to ask, finding it difficult to believe that a mere apprentice had the resources necessary to even survive an encounter with such an unpredictable and mighty foe. "Good morning. It's a lot of reading. It's a good amount of reading, though. I want things to be, like, nice and chill for folks. But we're also, like, on the last page of where we're going to be reading. The Faceless One, Massage kicks the corpse again. Took the credit in the statue, but they are mine. Everything else in here will go to you, of course. I know the magical Dwemmers the most, and will show you what is what." Brightening at the hope that he would indeed survive this dreadful day, Alton cared little about the figurine at that moment. All he wanted was to be freed of the web so that he could find out the truth of his house's fate. Then Massage, ever a confusing young drow, turned suddenly and started away. "Where are you going?" Alton asked. "To get the acid." "Acid?" Alton hid his panic well, though he had a terrible feeling that he understood what Massage meant to do. "You want the disguise to appear authentic," Massage explained matter-of-factly. "Otherwise, it wouldn't be much of a disguise. We should take advantage of the web while it lasts. It'll hold you still." "No," Alton started to protest, but Massage wheeled on him, the evil grin wide on his face. "It does seem a bit of pain, and a lot of trouble to go through," Massage admitted. "You have no family, and will find no allies in Sorcerer since the Faceless One was so despised by other masters." He brought the crossbow up to level with Alton's eyes and fitted another poisoned dart. "Perhaps you would prefer death." "Get the acid!" Alton cried. "To what end?" Massage teased, waving the crossbow. "What have you to live for, Alton DeVere, of no house worth mentioning?" "Revenge," Alton sneered, the sheer wrath of his tone setting the confident Massage on his heels. You have not learned of this yet, though you will, my young student, but nothing in life gives more purpose than the hunger for revenge." Massage lowered the bow and eyed the trapped drow with respect, almost fear. Still, the apprentice Hunnett could not appreciate the gravity of Alton's proclamation until Alton reiterated, this time with an eager smile on his face. "Get the acid." And, so the Faceless One was what this guy was called because he had a experiment that went wrong and, like, his whole face is, like, melted. Oh my gosh. Oops. Sorry about that. I need a bookmark. Something to serve as a bookmark. I had one. I literally had a bookmark just yesterday. And I was like, oh, this is in my way. And of course, now that I need it, it's disappeared. I'm sure I can pull a bookmark from another book. One moment. There we go. We'll do this one. Yeah, his face is like melted with acid and it's all like fucked up and gooey and ugly. And so that's why they were like, get the acid, because if he's gonna assume the identity of the Faceless One, he's gotta melt his face off. His other option is death, obviously, but yeah, drows, you know? Drow of society, yo. Crazy. Oh, give my voice a little bit of a break. Oh, it's been 2 hours. I think I'm gonna go ahead and take a quickie break. Just go lay down for a bit, get some more water because we're all out here, and maybe play a little game. I do have work later, but I think it might be fun to play some games. If anybody wants to play games with me, what games do I have to play with folks? I always have Ghost Hunter's Core, if anybody wants to play that. I also have Hunt Showdown, which needs to be updated, so we'll do that now. I guess Phasmophobia also newly came out, but I'm afraid of the new Phasmophobia patch. It is... Acid is a big fear of mine. Understandable. It sounds like some of the most, like, horrendously painful shit in the world, and having that on your face... Whew. Like... Ooh. Yes, enjoy a break. Thank you, Jackie. I'll be right back. Break. And if anybody wants to play games, think about what games you might want to play. Hunt or Ghost Hunter's Core, or if we can think of anything else. Maybe the golfing game. Golf with friends. We'll see. Wow, wow, wow. Hey everybody, I am back. This is gonna sound weird, I am gonna actually end stream real quick and immediately start it up again. Just because I want to be posting the reading streams on my YouTube, and that'll make separating it out from the gaming just a bit easier. So, yes. I'm gonna stop the stream, change my title, and we're gonna come back and have some fun. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll do a Ghost Hunters core, because that's what I've been interested in playing. Or, you know what? No, let's play Monster Hunter Stories 2, because I love that game. And, you know, I'm not going to be playing with folks. I don't want to risk dying. Anyways, see you guys back in literally just a moment.